day 2 of the Meadowood Sewalong. Today we're going to be talking about measuring your body and then taking those measurements and determining which size on the size chart to sew. So just a reminder, the pattern is drafted for a height of 5'9", so you may need to make some adjustments to the pattern in case you have a larger or shorter torso than me, and so that the pattern fits you correctly. So let's go ahead and grab a flexible measuring tape, and we're going to take some body measurements so that we can then take that information to the size chart and determine which size you should sew for this pattern. So this pattern has the ability to use either the B or the D sewing cup. Now, a sewing cup size is not the same as a bra size. It is determined based on the upper bust measurement and the full bust measurement. The difference between those two measurements is your sewing cup size. So if you have a 1-inch difference, that's an A cup, 2-inch B cup, 3-inch C cup, and so on. This pattern has both a B and a D sewing cup front pieces, so it will help the pattern lay as intended based on the cup size you choose. So we'll get started with the first measurement, which is your upper bust measurement. So the easiest way to do that is to take your measuring tape and put it along your bra strap in the back. Around the front, you're going to pull it up above your full bust. That measurement is your upper bust measurement. So in my case, and you don't want to pull too tight, just comfortably take a deep breath, then you know it's in the right place. For me, that is like a 38.5. Now, with leaving the measuring tape at the same spot in the back, you're going to pull it down and go across the fullest part of your bust. And that's a 39. So basically I have half an inch difference, so not even an A cup. But regardless, make note of those measurements on yourself. Again, upper bust and full bust. Once you have that information, that helps you determine which sewing cup size you are. Now that we have those two measurements, let's go ahead and take the waist measurement and your full hip. For the waist, for some people, they have a clear waist line, but if you don't, you can put your hands sort of right here on your body and bend side to side. Where your body bends, that's roughly where your natural waist is. So just keep track of where that is. Now, some people may carry more of their weight in the front. For my waist, I definitely carry more of the weight in the front. So finding that natural waist is gonna ensure that you put the measuring tape around the fullest part of your waist. So you go around your natural waist. In my case, that's about a 35 inch. So 38.5, 39, 35. Now, I mentioned in the previous video that this pattern is intended to hit at high hip, which is kind of between waist and full hip. But the pattern is drafted based on the information for your full hip. So that is basically the fullest part, whether it's across your butt, or in my case, I carry more of the weight in what you would call like the saddlebags. So take the measuring tape around the fullest part of your hips and measure that. Mine is a 48. So now that we have these measurements, we are going to look at the size chart and see where the size chart puts us in regards to those very specific measurements. Now, I did want to tell you that when you're choosing a size, try to focus on the actual numbers, not on the size, because the sizes are sort of an arbitrary label. You have to label the different sizes in your pattern something. So focused on the measurements. There's no judgment in those measurements. Just make sure that you're choosing the correct size so that your garment actually fits your body. So what we can do is have a look at the size chart based on my measurements, and I'll show you how I would go about choosing a size. So if you remember, my upper bust was a 38.5. So that puts me between a 10 and a 12 if I was to choose based on my upper bust measurement. Because I'm not even a B sewing cup, instead I will be choosing based on my full bust measurement. Most people are going to choose based on upper bust and then full bust. So that gives you a little bit of wiggle room in terms of which size you choose. I will say that if you're between sizes, I definitely recommend going with the lower size. If you want even more room through the garment, go ahead and get the upper size, but if you're between sizes, go with the lower size. So that puts me at an 8 in the bust. So I am between the 8 and the 10. We're gonna go ahead and go with the 8 B cup at the bust. Now again, this pattern has lots of ease through the rest of the garment. So you could choose to not grade between sizes if you would like, but I have always graded between sizes in the versions that I have sewn, and so that it has the intended oversized look. So this is completely up to you, but in terms of me, I will walk you through how I grade between sizes so that I get this really oversized look, especially because there's quite a difference between my bust and my hips. Okay, so we have size 8 for my bust, and then if you remember, my waist was 35, which puts me at a 14 for my waist. So an 8 to a 14 to my waist, and then my hip is actually an 18. So if I was to do a straight 8, that is not taking into consideration that my hips actually put me in an 18. So in my case, because there is such a spread of measurements, I'm gonna grade from an 8 to an 18 at the hip, and I will walk you through how I do that. Once you have chosen sizes based on your measurement, you can actually consult the finished garment measurements chart to determine whether you're going to have enough ease. Again, this pattern is oversized. So it's more about making sure that you get the look you want and trying to decide whether or not you will be grading between sizes. So now that you've checked out the size chart, you have looked at the finished garment measurements, you can decide on your final size that you will be sewing. Again, this is a garment for you and your style. So if you want something that's not quite as oversized, you could easily just size down. Just pick a size on the finished garment measurements, ensuring that you have enough ease. But I definitely encourage you, at least for the first one, to sew the size based on your measurements, even if it means grading between sizes. It's hard to determine if a pattern is going to work for you if you make too many changes before even trying the pattern on. So I recommend using this as a really great, well-fitting muslin and determining how you like the overall fit before you start making other sizes. Okay, so if you are going to grade between sizes on the pattern, let me show you how you will go about doing that. We, again, will use my measurements as an example so I can show you how you adjust the pattern pieces. So if you remember, it was a size 8 for me at the bust, a 14 through the waist, and an 18 at the hips. So with the first piece in mind, which I'm going to use the front yoke as an example, the front yoke goes basically until right here. So you are going to use the size that you determined for your bust, whether it's the B cup or the D cup. So what we will do is you will find your line here, and for me, I know that it is the 8, so I would do just the solid 8. So for the top yoke, I would just do an 8. The real change is going to happen when we do the lower front. Because you did an 8 for the upper front yoke, we are also going to start at an 8 right here on the front piece. So that's like right here. You want it to be an 8 here and an 8 at the top so that they match together perfectly. So in this case, we'll do an 8, and you're gonna follow the 8 through, because this is about where your bust is. And then you will follow the 8 through the curve, because again, this is, if you look at this shirt, my bust is right here, so it's sort of through the curve. So you will follow the curve, and then as you're going through the curve, you're going to want to stop and determine where your hip measurement is. So again, mine is an 18. So this is an 18, and you're going to want to do, you know, maybe about an inch and a bit up. And the reason you stick with the 18 for about an inch and a half or so is that when you're actually hemming, that means that that is trued. That means it's going to fold up and you won't have excess fabric. So you do an 18, and now you know you need to basically work your way from here and down to this point. And you want it to be smoothish. I tend to just freehand it and hope that it works out. You could get proper like drafting rulers. I don't think that's necessary. It's gonna be close enough. So let me show you how I do it. So I go here, remember we're on the 8, and we know that this is the 14, and this is roughly where your waist is. So you wanna almost pass through the 14 on your way to the 18. So you're coming here, and then you just kind of make your way down to the 18. Again, it does not have to be perfect. As long as you have like a general idea, your curve is roughly smooth, you're totally fine. And then with all of this grading, whatever you do to the front, you also have to do to the back. So the back yoke, again, will just be an 8. But then when you go to do the back lower, you're gonna do the same grading to the back lower so that the two side seams match. You could lay this on top of the other one and trace it, but I don't think it matters that much. So you can freehand it again. It's all gonna turn out great, I promise. Once you start sewing it together, as long as your curves are relatively smooth and your lines don't have any sharp edges, you're gonna be fine. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Just try to mirror what you did in the front with the back. So now that you've got the grading between sizes, I want to show you how to make the adjustments to the pattern so that it fits your body like intended. The biggest adjustment that has to be made, and this came up in testing, was based on the distance from your shoulder to the apex of your bust. So because the style line has the bottom of the yoke about 5 inches up from the apex of your bust, if it is different than what the pattern is drafted for, then you need to make some adjustments, because again, we don't want the pattern cutting straight across your bust. Okay, so this is actually an incredibly easy adjustment. So we've got the size 8 that we did. Now, the biggest thing you will do now is take your paper rotary cutter or your scissors, and we are actually going to cut on this lengthen, shorten line. Now, let me cut. This is the horizontal lengthen and shorten line. Now, once you have measured the pattern pieces and measured your body and determined how much you either need to move it up or down, that is the adjustment that we are going to be making. So, if you determined you need to remove an inch of length, you are going to take the pattern piece that you just cut apart and you are going to overlap by about an inch. Again, you will do proper measuring on this. The key though is making sure that you maintain the grain line, and you can really use this lengthen shorten line as a reference. So once you have that, you're going to go ahead and put a couple of pieces of tape. So now that you have overlapped it, put some tape on it to keep it in place, and you've ensured that the grain line is still the same and the lengthen shorten line, you've lined everything up. If you look over here at the sleeve edge, those lines no longer match up, and that's because we've removed some of the length from the yoke. So you obviously cannot cut your pattern piece like that. You need to be able to have it be a straight line. The easiest way to accomplish that is to take your straight edge ruler and connect the shoulder, the point that's right here at the shoulder seam, with the edge of the seam allowance down here. Now this pen's quite thick, but you'll get the right idea. You're going to draw a new edge. So you're essentially just creating a new blended edge that combines the two lines. So with your new edge, now you're set for the outside, and you would repeat the same thing for over here. Now we know that this is the size 8. Oh no, sorry. This is the size 8, and you want it to reach here. So you're going to do the same that you did on the other side and draw a new straight front line right here. So try to make those two lines smooth. The same goes for any other changes you make. You always need to adjust either the curve or the straight line once you've overlapped. Now the same process goes if you are going to be lengthening something. So whether this is lengthening the body of the top, or if you need more room from your shoulders to your full bust. So instead of overlapping it, you would spread it apart the desired amount. In this case, we'll say like an inch. And you can even use this to ensure that your grain line stays like that. You can even use the mat that you're cutting on to help give you the correct distance, or a ruler. It's totally up to you. You will put a piece of scrap paper behind it and then tape the pattern pieces to the scrap paper and do the exact same thing we did over here. Draw your new lines, because it's going to work in the opposite direction this time, remember? You take this and then you draw your new line for the side seam and the front curve. So this is the most common adjustment that you will be making, but you could also make adjustments to the width. So if you like the whole fit of the top, if the bust point, these gathers are hitting you at the right place, you like the neckline, everything's comfortable, but your sleeve is way too long, you have two options. The first is to hem your sleeve with a slightly bigger seam allowance. This will mean though that you'll have a little less width here at the underarm point, But it's a quick and easy fix if you want shorter sleeves. Now, the easier, or I guess that's the easiest. Now, the second option is that you can do lengthen, shorten with the vertical lines on the pattern pieces. So there are vertical lengthen and shorten lines on the pattern. So that ensures that the front edge is the correct size, that the gathers are in the right place, and it's just a way to bring that sleeve in a little bit. So you would do the process the same way that you did the lengthen shorten for the front yoke. You would cut along the lengthen shorten line, spread apart or overlap as needed, and then tape it together, adjust your lines, and then you can move forward. Now, the reason I say you can make these adjustments for the width and not just size down is that you also have to take into consideration when you size down the neckline, the back neck, the front neck, all of that is based on the proportions of that size. So if your body is, say, a size 8, but I want it to be not quite as wide, by going to a size 2, the neckline is not going to fit. It will fit, it just may not fit as the pattern intended. So usually by using the lengthen and shorten lines, this is going to keep the proportions correct, but also give you the fit that you would like. So whatever you decide to do, the lengthen shorten is the same process, whether you're doing vertical or horizontal lengthening and shortening. The most important thing to remember is whatever you do to the front, you also need to do to the back. And the one thing that is actually different between vertical and horizontal lengthen and shortening lines is the amount that you adjust. When you do the vertical, when you're cutting across the horizontal lengthen and shorten lines, the amount that you want to remove or add, you just do that number. So if you want it to be an inch shorter, you remove an inch. But because this adjustment is reflected in the front and the back, you can't necessarily calculate the amount the same way. So again, if you do an inch for this adjustment, you just do an inch. But if you're wanting to remove an inch from this, if you want to remove an inch from here, you actually will only be removing 1/4 of an inch from the pattern piece. Because this, either it's cut on the fold or it's a mirror image. So if you were to look at your entire garment, and if you removed an inch from here, that means you would be removing an inch from here, and you would be removing an inch from the back of each sides. So you think you're removing an inch, you're actually removing 4 inches. So you're not going to want to remove 4 inches if your intention is to only remove an inch. So if you're doing any adjustments to the width of the garment, divide that number by 4, because all of the pattern pieces are either cut on the fold or they're mirror image. This was a lot of information for today, talking about choosing a size, measuring your body, making any adjustments. I know that I have given you a lot to think about. With any of these videos, please feel free to reach out to me, whether by email or through Instagram, any way you would like. And I'm happy to talk sizes, picking sizes, making pattern adjustments, or any other questions you might have. Another great resource is check out my Facebook group, which I'll put in the information below. There's a great group of ladies that can help you if I am unavailable or if you just have a really quick question. So that is it for day 2 of the sew along. I hope that you feel more confident choosing your size, measuring your body, making adjustments. If you don't want to make adjustments, don't. You can practice with this one and try again for the next one. And just remember, any of the information that I've shared in this video is sort of general fitting and adjustment knowledge. So this isn't specific to Meadowood. The lengthening and shortening of a pattern, you could do that same method on any pattern. But specifically for this one, I just wanted to walk you through how you do it and why you do it, so that if you would like to try making some adjustments, you can definitely do it. But again, send any of your questions my way. I'm happy to walk you through choosing a size and all of that. And I look forward to seeing you for day 3 of the sew along, where we get to finally cut our fabric.